Welcome back to Landman Now, podcasting the profession, brought to you by the American Association of Professional Landmen. I'm your host, Chad Smith, and in today's episode of our Landman TV companion podcast, we'll be covering season 2 episode of Paramount's Landman and separate the fact from the fiction, highlighting the real work behind the drama. Joining the show today, we have Dianna Ray and Clarke Richards. Thank you both so much for joining us. And before we get started, why don't you give the audience a little bit of background on yourselves? Dianna, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. Dianna Ray, I am a senior supervisor in the land department for Expand Energy. I've been in the oil and gas business for about 14 years. I've worked the Bakken in North Dakota, the Mid-Continent in Oklahoma, the Marcellus in Pennsylvania, and I'm currently working the Haynesville in Louisiana. My background is an in-house landman type work. So all of these various areas that I mentioned have been work from the corporate office in Oklahoma City, with some travel at times to the various field locations as needed. I am a member of AAPL and serve on various board committees, as well as involved in our local Oklahoma City Association, where I will assume the president role in 2026. That kind of leads me to Clarke's intro. Clarke is currently serving as OCAPL president this past year for 2025. So I'll let him introduce himself as well.
Absolutely. My name is Clarke Richards. I am a landman with Continental Resources. Got in the industry around 2011. I have as well been in Oklahoma City my entire career. I've worked the Permian Basin. I've worked New Ventures, and I'm currently working the Anadarko Basin here in Oklahoma. As Dianna mentioned, I am currently the OCAPL president and will be handing the realm off to Dianna here within the next few weeks. I've also been involved in numerous AAPL committees from chairs to committee members and looking forward to being on here with you guys.
Well, thanks again for taking the time to join the show today and give us your insights. So we'll kick things off with probably the biggest technical storyline in the episode, to me at least, kind of the operational incidents that keep stacking up for MTechs. So between the truck crash, the H2S exposure, uh, kind of the past infrastructure failures, Episode 4 gives us a lot to unpack as far as liability and safety in the oil field are concerned. The opening of it, we see the MTech's truck involved in a fatal collision with a suicidal guy sitting in his truck. So in real life, who would face kind of the greatest liability exposure here? Would it be the operator, the third party hauler, if they're a contractor? Would it be the guy who was committing suicide with his estate? And how quickly would these legal consequences begin to take shape?
Um, yeah, I mean, so obviously it's a situation with a lot of things happening. I think the third party hauler would probably have the greatest liability. But when something like that happens, there's going to be exposure on all sides, and you're going to have to understand like what actually happened, what were the circumstances. Um, so everyone's probably going to end up being a party to whatever the suit is. And it just kind of, again, depends on the circumstances. Again, was the driver sober? We don't know that. But I do think that, as far as how the accident occurred, it's probably not going to happen like that on a pad site. So the driver was driving really, really fast. Probably wouldn't have been driving that fast on a pad location. Probably not really possible to be doing that. Um, and having another vehicle on that site is kind, with the suicide attempt or whatever. I mean, I find that kind of hard to believe as well. I think that's probably a little bit of Hollywood there. Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of times there's gates upon entering pad sites, cattle guards as well. So truckers are generally going to be going a lot slower. And there's going to be mitigation and safety protocols that truck driver would need to be operating under. And I think he'd probably be going a lot slower. But again, I did put in a chat GPT search to understand how heavy a truck trailer can be with frac sand. I think that's what they were carrying. It's about 24 tons, which is about 46,000 pounds. So very heavy. So if for some reason that truck driver were to turn the, truck, get in an accident, it would be potentially fatal and very devastating. But again, I think the circumstances probably aren't going to happen necessarily the way they did in the show, but it would be a devastating accident if it did happen.
Absolutely. No, I agree with exactly what you're saying, Diana. I think Hollywood did have a huge play into that by how fast that semi truck was driving on the roads. It appeared that he was still traveling the same speed as he was on the highway. And for the fact that it was just right there and as big of an accident, that's 100% Hollywood. Is that partially real? I mean, could be. I think it's more for the show entertainment to kind of bring awareness that there is a lot of liability out there for what we do on a daily basis. One thing that I kind of did notice when looking at that pad, to me, it seemed extremely small. So there's a lot of safety liability on that one as well. We don't know anything about it, right? That's those wells that we don't know if they're the ones that they were looking at to purchase, as we saw in the last few episodes, or is that one of their own operated pads? We don't know that yet. But to me, looking at how that pad size was, one truck doesn't even have a room to turn around on there. And so to have numerous vehicles, to have the frac sand out there, and the operation safety concern is absolutely evident in that pad. And that's kind of why you take all of that into consideration and why safety is such a critical thing in what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wouldn't even thought about like the size of that pad and the 18 wheeler not being able to turn around. Um, Speaking of the pad and the easement, um, the show references both the pad and the easement during the truck crash scene. Can you walk us through kind of the technical differences between a pad site, or between pad site rights and easements, and how the distinction can affect the operator's responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, the easement is the road that you get to your pad. And so some of the times um, you're going to have separate estates. You're going to have a mineral estate versus a surface estate. Sometimes they're separate. And so what you'll have to do on that instance, you're going to negotiate a surface use agreement. You're going to negotiate how big that pad size is going to be. Where is it going to be located? You're going to deal with the landowners for where the road is going. How's the terrain look? And all of those sorts of things are typically negotiated in a separate agreement. And so to me, the easement, you're going to have different types of easements as well, right? You're going to have the road easement. You're also going to probably have pipeline easements if you're going to hook that up to a midstream marketing group. And so they did use the term easement on the crash site when in reality it happened on the pad.
Yeah, yeah, to add to that, I agree. It generally an easement is kind of like a legal right for like a really specific purpose, like pretty long term, like think utilities, roads, pipelines. Pad site is so much more than that. Like Clarke mentioned, the surface use agreement, that's what you're going to be negotiating with that landowner in order to build that pad. Um, and it's a pretty robust contract. It takes into account a lot of different things. It's more customizable, but it will include like the pad well location, road construction, maintenance, water use, power lines, pipelines, noise, compensation, timing of operations, environmental matters, surface restoration after operations are over. So many things are contemplated in that surface use agreement. It's very robust, and it's in order for the company to be able to access the minerals while also protecting the landowner's surface. So I know she threw out the attorney did, Rebecca, oh, the easement, but really like a pad is so much more, and there's so much contemplated within that operation. And so just kind of want to bring light to sort of what contracts are out there that we negotiate when looking for pad site locations and operations.
Yeah, a lot more goes into it than just, oh, this is where we're going to drill.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So if the truck had been driven by an MTEX employee versus a contracted hauler, how would the liability shift from the contract to the MTEX? And in a wrongful death scenario, could MTEX still be sued even if the other driver had initiated that crash, the guy sitting in his truck with the carbon monoxide poisoning situation?
Yeah, so I'm not, I don't know Texas law specifically on this. But again, I think it comes down to the circumstances. If it's an MTEX employee, then the liability is going to shift more towards MTEX. But again, we've got to understand and do the due diligence on, was this person under any influence? Because that person and some of this as well. So what's going to happen as this happens, then all the attorneys are figuring out, okay, what are the facts, what's happened, and then starting to put together like their understanding and then what their, liability would be within what occurred. But yeah, and then the other driver, if they had initiated the crash, yeah, that would be a different circumstance as well, which would shift liability. So yeah, I mean, they're going to build each party is going to build their own fact pattern and their own case and try to mitigate as much liability as they can at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And realistically, even if it was an independent contractor or MTEX, both parties are going to be named in that lawsuit if there was one.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Diana's talking about is each party will then put up a defense and go into so many more cases and arguments and facts. It's all going to be fact basis, but both parties will be in a potential lawsuit at that instance.
Yeah.
We got a couple more questions kind of on the safety and liability uh, topics here. So Jarrell, the guy who was on top of that tank during the H2S exposure, he suffers vision loss from that H2S exposure. So in real world operations, who is responsible for ensuring the gas monitors and the PPE are properly calibrated? Is it someone within the company? Is it the supervisor on site? Who is that? And in the event something like this happens, how quickly, realistically, would that crew be pulled off of location?
I think so. Everybody is responsible. I will say at Continental, every single person in this company has a stop procedure. A company man can go out there and visually see a safety instance. They could call it out and you could put the work down until it's fixed or addressed. Um, to be specific about who's making sure that it's calibrated, you're usually going to have an HSE lead out there or people that are more familiar with properly maintaining that equipment. I was glad to see that they had it out there. That is one thing that I know all of our crews have out there. You don't often come across it, but there are definitely instances in these fields where H2S is a huge matter that they take seriously. It's usually one that you don't even know it. That you can't really smell it, and the sensors go off. Realistically pulled off of location, I think everybody has it in place and they know what to do. You have to have a plan of action. And when those monitors go off, I think they did do a great job at representing that. You run away from the wind. You get as far away as you possibly can because you don't know how that's going to go. When shifts, as we saw, you get as far as you can when you listen to those monitors.
Yeah, and I thought this scene was interesting because I knew immediately once it was opening up to this scene and it was, zooming into their monitors, I was like, there's going to be an H2S incident in this scene. And Yeah, I mean, I think all parties on site are responsible. You're going to have um, equipment checks from time to time. There's going to be normal checks that are part of your operations, but every person is responsible for their equipment as well. This is a different situation because they're visiting somebody else's site. When that normally happens, you probably have somebody from that other company visiting with you. They're not going to just really let you go on your own on their
Exactly.
site. So there's probably going to be another company representative from whoever owns that pad site or the equipment at that point. And then yeah, I mean, there's different requirements for companies' practices on what to do. If you're visiting a site, you're gonna talk through these things before you get on somebody else's site. They want you to know what to do when certain circumstances happen. So they're probably going to give you a safety rundown immediately upon being on that site and what happens if these situations arise. So there's going to be a little bit more information that, individuals would have gotten here to know what to do in this situation. But yeah, I mean, when something like this does happen, you should know what your policies are and you should know what the next steps are. And really it's get out of harm's way, get yourself protected, and then secure life for other people, and then start calling your supervisor and immediate responders to help respond to the situation. So they, in general, they kind of got it right a little bit, but there's going to be a lot more information from the get-go.
Is that something that that crews will practice, kind of like a, hey, we got to do our yearly H2S run through, make sure that everybody's on the same page, and event something like this happens?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They're talking about it more often. Really, anybody on location is going to talk about this much more. Even me as a company landman, not in the field very often, I am required yearly to take a training that covers H2S and other PP, all sorts of things to ensure that we know what our policies are. But yeah, they're going to get it a lot more often, being in the field, every day.
And most of the time, you're also going to have morning breakdowns. You're going to have your review. What's your plan of action? Here's what we're doing. Those sorts of things as preparation for the day. So all of those are there. They do practice them. As Diana said, being in house, you definitely get that for the instance if I needed to go out to meet a landowner. I know what I need to do if I'm on location. Do I have the right gear? Then you need to check in with your field and your team to make sure everything's coordinated. It's all about communication, to be honest.
And then whenever there is an H2S leak like that, what organizations are notified of that? Is that something like I think the Railroad Commission does some of that stuff, is it, if I'm not mistaken? Is that something that, or OSHA, or who all gets notified of a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be various parties that will need to be notified because it'll be an incident that needs to be communicated that occurred. Each state will probably tell you how that who needs to be notified in those situations. But yeah, you're gonna have to notify. So that is going to be part of that process for sure.
And so, across seasons 1 and 2, as we've mentioned, there's been multiple incidents between the truck crashes, the H2S exposure, pad side incidents, and accidents. So, if you were advising MTechs, would you recommend pausing operations and doing like a full safety audit, or would you keep the rigs running, maybe to avoid scaring off investors and lenders? It's kind of a tricky situation to be in, but I kind of like to get your opinion on what you would do in that situation.
Yeah, I would kind of cease everything. So something we do at our company at Expand, we have what's called a safety stand down. So if we're seeing, some issues popping up here and there, we can initiate a safety stand down where we essentially stop all work. We kind of reconvene as teams and walk through what it is we're seeing. How we're going to mitigate these efforts, and make sure everything is more safe. and make sure that employees are aware and know what to do in whatever is occurring. I mean, safety is first um, for us every day. We want every person to go home how they showed up. It's our number one goal. We also have, Clarke mentioned it earlier, it's called a stop work authority. So any person, any party on location, if they see something unsafe, they can initiate the stop work authority and shut everything down right then to ensure that something bad doesn't happen. And it is encouraged that that does happen. And it's not something that it looks bad, right? Like we want to encourage employees to be as safe as they can and to go home in one piece. So it is our number one goal is to be safe. So there's a lot of things happening. I don't think you're going to see from a company all these things happening to it. That would be crazy. Do things happen? Yes, absolutely. It is dangerous. But yeah, if all this was happening, we'd be having some big, come together meetings and discussing our safety protocols for sure.
What are we
That's
doing?
exactly. When you look at a lot of the prudent operators, of which there's so many out there, I guarantee you the number one thing that everybody has at the top of their list is safety. So yes, the safety audit would definitely take place because at the end of the day, shutting it down for 5 minutes, hour, 24 hours, that is worth it at the end of the day. That's not going to truly impact your well at the end of the day. The economics are still going to be there. It might have cost you a little bit more, but at the end of the day, if something as tragic as what we've been seeing, that's going to cost you a significant amount more of money than it is to put a pause on there and address the situation right then and there. Everybody, I think, has that same goal of show up and leave the exact same. Yes, accidents happen. I think it was in this episode when they were at the hospital and
Yeah.
Drell was in there, and I think the scene happened when you saw another employee that came in that had his arm amputated because of a hydraulic lift. What we do is why safety has to be at your number one priority because these machines are so impactful on absolutely everything that one little accident truly can lead to an amputation or death from just a simple something, right? So yeah, no, you have to do it. I think your investors would understand it because of the liability and legality behind it all if something did happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want more lawsuits. I mean, that I'm sure investors would understand that, right?
Absolutely.
So, kind of the last question I have as far as kind of accidents and liability goes. After the funeral, they're all sitting down at lunch, and TL mentions how his home was burned down due to an unburied electrical line. Tommy goes on to argue that, the burial of the lines are too expensive. But if an unburied line causes a fire that destroys homes and ranch lands, wouldn't the operator be liable in that case? And wouldn't it be cheaper to just bury the line than the legal ramifications and the financial fallout that comes from that?
I say it depends. A lot of the times you'll work with electrical companies and they could build out to your lines. There's some times where you kind of help and wait for them to connect it. I think it depends on a lot of those different instances. Um, I do think the wind out in Midland is definitely out there for sure. Do I think that was a Hollywood story? Yes. Kind of one of the things that when you look at kind of at wildfires across our nation, I'm pretty sure that you'll see more fires are started due to semis chains running on the concrete and dragging and starting to sparks in that manner more than electrical lines. But from the liability, I think it just depends on who built it, who connected it, how was it properly secured. There's just so many other things that we don't know. But do I think burying the lines and doing everything? I agree with Tommy. That is definitely going to be a lot more expensive um, for burying them. You're obviously going to have your easements for your power line easements that we kind of talked about earlier today. You're going to have a lot of those similar things, but I do think that the cost is definitely more expensive because, um, as we kind of mentioned earlier, pad sites are also temporary. You could abandon them, you could reclaim them, and then you just built an underground power line that's no longer of existence. And that's probably why you see a lot of poles going out to all of our locations. And then once they're established and you see how everything is, that's when you kind of connect it in a different electrical manner.
So is it, I mean, he made it sound like they're just letting these lines run on the ground. Is aerial lines more common than just letting them lay on the ground?
Yeah, then they wouldn't necessarily lay on the ground. You'd bury them. Most of your time, in a lot of these agreements, you'll see, I think, 36 inches or disc depths. And so there are certain requirements that they'll put out there just so you not a farmer is not going to go out there, plow his ranch, and then run over an electrical line. No, they would be plowed and buried deeper than plow depth. But most of the time when you see it, you're going to have overhead power lines.
Okay. So the kind of the accidents and everything aren't just the only thing in this episode, right? We also start to get into MTex's financial issues. So let's shift a little bit from the operational side to the money side and look at how some of the private capital and the debt and maybe, the fundraising is starting to come into play. And with that, Cammy meets with I can't remember the guy's name, but the cartel money man, right? To try and keep MTEX afloat. So while I know that the cartel aspect is obviously there for to sensationalize the storyline a little bit, in real world oil and gas, how does outside capital affect an operation? Does it introduce control rights or inconvenient covenants that are going to create long-term risk? Is it something that you try and shy away from, or is it something that's a little more welcomed?
Yeah, so from my standpoint, it kind of depends on your company. Are you private? Are you public? How you're going to get your funding. Seems like MTEX is maybe a private company, so maybe they could potentially have an investor like I think his name is Danny. Is that right?
I think that's right.
And so, yeah, maybe that's possible there. I don't know. I don't know if his business is truly legitimate or not. It's hard to say, like, if any of that cartel money is coming into that business or if the business is standalone. Outside of that, I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to want to know that whoever's investing is legitimate. So you're probably going to have some checks and balances on that. A public company is probably not going to have that kind of investor. They're going to have like institutions invest, for their debt. But there's ways to work with people. So whether it's just like an investment into the company, but there's also other opportunities to work with other companies like joint ventures, where you can decide that you want to go in together and develop an area, but kind of mitigate the capital exposure. There's that kind of an option too. We don't know what's going to happen with this partnership, so maybe they will go there. I don't know. There's also other ways to have companies invest when you're forming a unit. Other companies may own leases within that unit. And so when what we call pool all the leases together to form a unit, other parties may be included in that unit and then become what is called a working interest owner, where they will get a proposal to potentially participate in that well with you and help fund it with their share of what they own. And then, they would receive revenue eventually once the well pays out and recoups all of that money. So there's different ways that people can come together and work together in the business. So it just kind of depends on how you set things up, essentially. But yeah, no, I don't know. I guess it's up to Tommy and Danny to work out all the details because Danny's not allowed to discuss the particulars with Cammy. So so maybe we'll find out more on what that negotiation looks like and what kind of a relationship they will have in a future episode.
Exactly. And I'd like to add too, I think it's truly dependent on your contract, and contract negotiations are so important in that matter, right? Um, does it help or put any risks to it, or does it kind of controlling? I think it truly is contract specific. I think of kind of there are instances in contracts, right? If you are bringing in a third party, um, and a proposal comes, what are the economics? Do you have economic thresholds that says if it is between these margins, they're automatically going to invest? If they're outside of that, it's negotiable on whether or not. I think that part um, is truly one of the great things that we could all do going into joint ventures. Where I'm working in Anadarko, we've had our joint venture partner for years, numerous years, and we've kind of used that great relationship, and it kind of assures also development, and it also mitigates some of the risk and how much is your capital exposure out there. Those sorts of things are in the benefit of both parties. You get to see the proceeds and revenue by spending half the capital out there. So you reduce your risk when you kind of look outside of capital. But as Dianna mentioned, you're looking at between public and private companies with those. Public company, not so much, but there still are going to have it. Private companies, you're going to have a lot of outside capital management groups, which we see in what we do on a daily basis. Um, to answer your question about distressed owners, yes, some of those contracts would potentially force those small companies to sell their assets. You've seen it in our industry. These funds that have three different entities, they kind of rolled them up together and saying, you guys are now one company. We're going to take your assets. We'll buy you guys out. This is going to be operated by so and so. So it really depends on kind of what each and everybody's situation is. But I don't think it's in a negative way at the end of the day, and that's why contract negotiations is so critical in what we do for the business.
Yeah, and so given kind of the legacy lawsuit, the $400 million lawsuit that they have, uh, some of these other things like the crash. I mean, it seems like MTEX would be a risky company to invest in, maybe for any legitimate investor. So, do you think that and a legitimate investor would fund them without requiring independent audits or borrowing audits? Or do you think that maybe she's having to go to the cartel because she knows that, you know, anybody else who's legitimate is gonna look really hard into this and probably decide it's not worth their time?
Yeah, and I think at that point we don't know enough, as they haven't been able to describe or kind of go into the weeds of what each entity was. I think they're mentioning that they had four different companies and how they're talking about the payroll and who pays what. I do think that probably did have a major impact on why she is going to Danny to fund that. I think um, the kind of the relationship and the kind of for the way I think what is he? I think they're at that lunch when they were talking about how he's not going to negotiate with her, he's going to negotiate with Tommy. Does he see that and understands it? And does he see there's that little portion of which he can start controlling and starting working with Tommy because of the Cooper affairs as well? Um, I do think that made a big impact, and I do think any investor, if she went out to anybody, they would definitely require an audit, and I think they would have a lot more difficult time being main funded.
And to me, it doesn't like it sounds like MTEX has already taken on money from everyone. So they've exhausted their efforts. They owe everybody. This is like the last party available. I don't think Cammy knows that he is part of the cartel. I think that's Tommy only. So I
I
think she's
agree.
truly trying to seek a legitimate investment. Um, anyway, yeah, I don't know. I would not invest in MTEX. Knowing saying we have no money. Where's our money? I mean, I would definitely say no, thank you.
I've also wondered whether or not she knows that I mean, she's not dumb. She's smart, but so is she playing coy and she acts like she doesn't know, or is she just,
Yeah.
have so many things going at her right now. She's just like, hey, here's somebody who wants to offer me money. That's a great thing. I'm, gonna ignore my better judgment. Or I've wondered that too, though, whether or not
I think it's
she
Hollywood.
realizes. Yeah.
That's the Hollywood aspect.
Um, so kind of the last part of this section or the section of questions. And for a real operator facing simultaneous legal, safety, liquidity, uh, who would lead the response in all this? Would it be a COO? Would it be the council? Would it be a CFO, an outside advisor? Because really, it seems like it's just Cammy doing some stuff and not telling Tommy, and Tommy doing some stuff and not tell. It seems very disorganized, and I don't think that the attorneys are really all that kept in the loop as to what's going on. So, how would a real company handle a situation like this with the chain of command?
I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
it's in
yeah,
good.
Clark, you can go ahead.
After you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because MTEX only has like 5 employees, or I mean, it doesn't seem, and then they have, their field, personnel, and a lot more field personnel than like actual, like, officers and VPs and individual contributors. So generally, a company is going to have more people. But again, it's a show, so you only have so many characters you want to depict. But yeah, there's going to be more people involved. There's going to be officers involved, especially with these, crazy legal issues and operational safety issues and money issues. I mean, you're going to have every officer, your CFO, your COO, your CEO, your general counsel, everyone's going to be involved in these discussions. You're going to be getting real-time information from your individual contributors and anybody in the hierarchy to have a clear understanding of what's going on. And then you are going to be looking at data, you're going to be looking at numbers, you're going to have many presentations and meetings, and you're going to walk through everything in a concise way, very organized with all the information at hand, and you're going to make decisions in an appropriate format and not just, oh, let me go meet with this guy and see if he'll give me money. Like that's, that's not how things are done. And it's going to take a lot more time than what is shown here. But yeah, your chain of command is really not accurately portrayed in this at all. There's going to be a lot more decision makers in the process, um, and again, like a public company is going to have a board, so you're going to have board involvement there. Now, MTech seems to be private potentially, so they will have the ability to do have a little bit more leeway to do what they want to do. But again, you're still going to have a lot more people involved in those discussions before you make decisions.
I completely agree. It's going to take everybody from the ground up. I think everybody's going to have a part. And I don't think I agree with what Dianna was just said. It's going to take some time. You got to compile it. You got to look at it. You got to weigh your risks. You got to weigh your rewards. Obviously, this is being a TV show. They're going to make decisions, handshake deals, and move on just to keep it going. But in reality, you're going to have everybody present. You'll be at the table with your attorneys. You're going to have every single person there making inputs, comments. You're going to have breakout sessions. It's going to go back and forth. Seldom does it really go on your first shot. Red lines are going to happen. You're going to make sure all of your contracts are in place. Bailouts, walkaway rights, all of those sorts of things will definitely be vetted well in advance as well.
And so another thing that kind of came out of Cammie's meeting with Danny guy, she mentions the offshore drilling problem, right? And she's trying to get money for that. But some of the numbers that she mentioned, I wanted to check and see kind of how realistic that was. So she says 90 days to mobilize, 10 months to reach depth, and she's going to need 325 to 350 million dollars. So is that timeline as well as a capital estimate, are both of those realistic for offshore drilling in the Gulf? And what kind of factors typically drive the cost and schedule?
Yeah, so I don't do offshore work, so I definitely had to do some research on some of this. So again, Chat GPT was my source of information, so take that for what it's worth. And in general, though, the I think they're talking about drilling in the Gulf is what it seems to be. And there's different types of drilling offshore. So and they take different amounts of time. So there is a shallow, a deep water, and an ultra deep water. And so it just basically depends on the depth to which you're drilling. Um, the shallow can take 1 to 2 months per well. Deep water seemed to have a range of 2 to 4 months, and the ultra deep water was 3 to 6 months. Now that's just for drilling. That doesn't include, completions testing, getting the production tubing installed. That can add a couple more months. So in general, I think the timeline maybe isn't too crazy. She said she would need to start in 90 days. I don't know if that's possible. That seems like a lot of effort, especially if your equipment was damaged in a hurricane. Is it up to speed? Is it ready to go? Like, feels like you might need to fix some things, but if it was ready to go, maybe you could start then. 10 months to drill. Sounds like that's possible for ultra deep water. I think the Gulf of Mexico is not ultra, it's the deep water, so maybe it wouldn't take as long to drill that. So yeah, not too far off, but at least you can see that Taylor Sheridan is doing a lot of research for this show, and there's actual some credibility there to some of those time frames. I didn't look at the investment. I don't know, Clarke, did you look into the offshore investment? I mean, I think obviously it's very expensive, and we don't know if that's the total investment she's asking for, or I mean, probably because they're out of money, but I didn't look into that specifically.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it is going to be more expensive, right? So I think it's the 325 million to 350. Is that the whole project, as you mentioned? If so, possibly. I'm not an offshore person, never have, but understand the part of that I kind of was confused by is once again it comes down to the terms. What do they agreed to? And I can't remember if they were forced to drill it or if they just needed to return to production. If it was damaged, is it completely damaged where they had to drill a new one? Or is there any remediation work that they could have done to restore that offshore well back to production? That's part of the questions that I started asking myself for that part of there. But when you kind of look at the project on a whole, offshore definitely does take a lot longer from all of the regulatory departments that you got to go through. I think it probably is a year, if not a little bit longer, to even get a permit out there. So it didn't sound like they were ready. It just sounded like they could go out there and do it in that time frame. Um, Mobilizing in 90 days, I think that's definitely feasible. I think 10 months, kind of as Dianna mentioned, where are they? Um, that seemed kind of long to me, especially for one well. If it was two, three wells, I think that's a perfect timeline. But it only sounded like one well to reach depth is kind of what she said, right? That to me seems a little bit of Hollywood, but once again, I'm no expertise in the offshore matters.
Yeah, it seems like a long time to just to, like she said, to get to maybe something that's not even in the ultra deep, but you start bringing in, I guess, the materials and trying, get everything out of the ground. Maybe it does take 10 months. Um, so not this episode covers a lot of the operational financial pressures, and we know these things take a toll not only on the company but the people. And that kind of brings us to what I think was another deep part of this episode was maybe mental health, right? And it kind of highlights the mental health aspects of working in some of this field. So we see that the driver who committed suicide. Um, we don't know that whether or not he worked for the company. It doesn't really allude either way, right? But he is out on that rig, so it kind of brings it back in there. How do companies typically address mental health? And are there any support systems in place? I know that it can be a rigorous job and a lot of hard hours and everything like that. So is this something that companies value and try to put an emphasis on, a good mental health?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, I mean, we have resources available that anybody can use for mental health. And yeah, I mean, it's made available to everybody at our company, not just in the field as well. But in the field is a lot harder work. I mean, um, when you are working on like an offshore rig or really any onshore rig too, like you have generally it's like 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off is kind of your schedule. And when each day is about a 12-hour work day, and then you have 12 hours off. So it is a long day. It is hard work. There's a lot of things going on that you have to be aware about safety wise, all this equipment, what the weather is. You're generally outside a lot of the time. So it is hard work. And so I do think mental health is an issue that you see often in the field. And so ensuring that your employees have the resources they need, and checking in with them and making sure, your employees and how they're feeling and what they're doing and getting a good pulse on that. So, yeah, I mean, I do think it is an issue, and it is bringing it to light that this is hard work, and it is real. So I'm glad they kind of go into this narrative a little bit because it is really, really hard work that people are doing out there every day and putting their lives at risk for energy.
Exactly. And I mean, when you look at it, they should all focus on that. For all the way from publics down to privates to family operated. Um, I'm more kind of thinking of the family operated private equity. Their stress really is going to make a huge impact on their mental health, right? They are putting their finances towards all of those wells, as you're kind of seeing Cooper do at the very beginning when he said he hit six in a row and kind of saying that never happens, right? Um, I think kind of there's different levels through it all. Yeah, there's physical, mental health that wears on everybody. The 12 hours days. Um, everybody has to be aware of that, and that also goes back to number one, safety. Being mentally clear in your head, to be able to focus on your job, to make sure everybody's safe at the end of the day is a huge part of what we do as a company, as an industry, right? So I think people do pay attention to that. They recognize um, that, and that's why because it ultimately falls underneath the safety umbrella.
And then, Danny, you mentioned the kind of the 2 on or the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I've heard of maybe 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. Um, TL, when they're talking about the situation at the funeral, Tommy mentions, he was gone for a year at a time.
Yeah, yeah. So we find out about Tommy's dad that he worked on a rig, and at the end of the day, what they mention is that he was gone for like a year at a time. And that's really not going to happen. Yeah, 2 weeks on or off. There's sometimes 28 days on and then 28 days off. You're never going to see like a year on or off, even if it was an offshore rig, which I believe it was offshore rigs that Tommy's dad was supposedly working on. But that's not going to happen. People have families and lives, and you're supporting your family. And so it is important for you to go back home and be with your family too. And to have that time off, like you need time off. So anyway, yeah, that's generally not going to happen. And you're not going to see somebody gone for like a year at a time. But again, this is Hollywood. They're developing that character complexity for Tommy to depict, his tough childhood. It's just development of his character in my mind, and it pulls at the heartstrings, given kind of that narrative. So a little bit embellished here, I think, but you're not going to really see that type of
No,
work set up.
no. From kind of everybody I've talked to that is with the kind of the offshore or understands it, yeah, it's pretty common that you're 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off.
Mm.
So at the end of the day, maybe 6 months, half of the year. But I also think it's also part of TL was probably his mental health, right? Understanding the situation at the house, being gone that long. We don't know anything about that, but to me, I think that was a choice, personal choice, not a career choice to be gone that long.
Yeah. And so, kind of this one's not as much mental health, but just it kind of plays into a little bit the kind of the how work, the companies take care of the people. Jarrell's reaction to the temporary blindness shows, an emotional, but also a physical impact to that injury. Um, how does a operator manage the medical, psychological, the return to work procedures for a worker facing, a condition like this, or the guy that loses his arm, anything like that? What kind of things are in place for a situation like that?
So I really probably don't have exposure to exactly what happens, but there is worker compensation. It's going to come down to, the attorneys in that party and figuring out what is needed for that employee. If they lose an arm or they can't see, they obviously can't return to work. So there is going to be something involved there. I've just never been involved in what that looks like, but I'm sure they would be taken care of somehow, obviously, for that whatever situation came to be, and then how it came to be as well. Um,
I
but yeah,
think, I mean, I'm right there with Dan. And thankfully, and unfortunately, I've never had to deal with that.
yeah.
Um, but once again, I think I can't speak for every company, but I think most companies have something in place. If you have a tragic event happen, most companies are going to let you have a bereavement period. They're going to let you focus on you because at the end of the day, you are all human. They understand that, and that if you're not at your top, they'll help you to be where you need to be because you're going to help the company at the end of the day. So I think they have those little things in place. I think that's kind of known, and I think once again, it's just kind of the injury. What's the component at the end of the day? What happened? Um, can you or would you be better suited in a different position if something happened like that? I think it's on a company basis, but I think most of them would be willing to work with you and figure out and how to help you at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, getting out of the technical weeds, if we want to lighten it up a little bit before we end the show, uh, I got a couple kind of more fun questions, I guess. So Ariana is contemplating whether or not she's going to keep this job as a bartender. And she says, well, I assume Fridays and Saturday nights are the best nights, whatever. And the bartender kind of looks at her and says, well, when there's a boom every night's a Friday night here. So how true is that really how it is out in the, these boom towns? Is it a pretty rowdy scene out there, or is it just Hollywood exaggerating it again?
I think to me, it's a combination of both. I do think Midland when oil is good. You could definitely tell the environment is completely different than when we're in lower oil periods. I remember when I first started my career, I was out in Midland. I can't remember what oil prices were, but they were high. And every hotel room was pretty much sold out in Midland, and we had to go to Odessa. Fast forward a few years after that, all of the construction, all of the apartment complexes that were currently under construction and that were 100% leased and occupied. I go a few years later and construction has stopped. Hotels are 100%, I don't say 100%, but vacant. You could find hotel rooms anywhere. Um, I think, I think oil cities like Midland definitely thrive on that. All of the third party contractors, the drilling crews that come in, I think does impact the city, the commerce that happens. I do think that when times are higher, I think a lot of deals have happened at bars, or at least started at bars. Give me a call tomorrow and we'll start papering this up. I think you kind of hear those sorts of things of people wanting to get out or strike while the oil's hot, right? I do think a lot of those do happen when times are good. So I've seen it. I wouldn't say it's every day is a Friday, but you could definitely tell the difference between the commodity prices and those sorts of towns.
Okay, so the last question. If you were suddenly dropped into the world of Landman, what job would you want? Landman, company man, investor, rig hand, bar owner, and why?
I mean, I'm gonna have to say, I'm gonna go with Landman. I mean, that's what I do, day in and day out, and I love it. I might make a plug here, on being a landman and what that kind of looks like, um, for me. But it's we're in an industry where we get kind of demonized a lot in general. And I appreciate the show humanizing, Tommy as a landman, and the workers in the energy industry, because you kind of are getting a glimpse at like actual people's lives, albeit dramatized, but like there are people behind this work in fueling America, and having the lives that we get to live in this fine country. So I like that it brings light, to leaders of this business and people like literally putting their lives at risk in order to provide energy to fuel our day to day that most people don't even think about it. Like their lights turn on and it's just there. So for me, yeah, I'm gonna go with Landman because I get to make a difference, in my life, in my family's lives, and in America as well, and being able to help provide energy to our country and allowing our country to prosper, and be where we are in the world, because of this industry that we're in, and I'm thankful for it, and I'm thrilled to be part of such an essential industry.
Absolutely. I'd merely the same thing. I think definitely being the layman, but if you had to drop me in, it's gonna be probably Tommy's right hand man, right? When he started coming the COO of there. At that point, um, to be able to show what we do, right? I have done it in the past, getting out to those landowner houses, meeting with those ranch owners, negotiating those documents, and that's part of kind of some of the things that I've talked to them about. Some of these individuals don't truly know what we do or why we do it. But when you look at what our industry touches in this world, it's everything. Right now, we're driving the AI, right? We're going to have all of the gas. There's so many things that we do for our future, that it's actually really cool to experience it firsthand right now. Everything that we do on a daily basis is the intent is to better the world, right? And I think some people probably take that for granted and just say it's just a job. But when you look at everything that we do, what goes into it, like Diana was mentioning, there's just so much more that makes our industry, probably one of the greatest ones. I'm so glad I chose this career. I've had kind of all of the past experiences, and each one are takeaways. And I think all the way from the field to in-house to investors, you all have your hands in every one of them. If you look at it from an investor perspective, even as a company man or even as a field landman, you're still an investor. You're investing in that project. You're investing in America's future. You're investing in everything that we're still doing. So you have to take that mentality and that approach at every single thing that you're doing. Yes, you're not maybe a financial investor, but you are an investor in the oil and gas sector, which is leading to absolutely everything. Without everybody working together, it would be a lot more difficult to do. But I think that's one of the great things that the show is doing. It's taking the snippets, it's making it Hollywood, it's glamorizing what they're doing. Would I have Paramount Plus following me in my office every single day and be as interactive? Probably not. But you take little segments of each one of what we do, and you're able to get that. And so that's kind of the interesting thing. Yes, there's a lot of fiction that goes into the show, but what portion of Hollywood doesn't have a little bit of fiction with some truth in it, right?
Absolutely. Well, those are both, I think, perfect answers to end on. But I'll say if was there anything else that either you wanted to touch on before we go?
Can I give a little AAPL plug here?
Absolutely.
I know both Clark and I are long-winded, so we'll wrap this up. But so again, AAPL does so much. I'm very thankful to be part of this organization. It sets standards for landmen, provides certification, development, learning opportunities, pathways to become a landman through education. Um, and a place for professionals to connect, as well as the organization advocates for our work and our industry. Our land workforce is so versatile and will be needed for oil and gas for a long time, but also for alternative energy that we've seen with solar, wind, et cetera. And then also, as artificial intelligence is on the horizon, and on the brink of like explosion for data centers that are coming our way, landmen are going to be needed for this work and are going to be integral to it. So if anything sounds intriguing or interesting about becoming a landman to you, it's a great career. You can provide for your family. It's vital to our country and our stability as a country in this world. So it's an amazing industry to work in. So go to landman.org and check out what a landman is, what we do, and start learning more about us. And if you're interested, come join us.
It's an excellent plug. Thank you.
uh, to tie on to that, one of the biggest things that we all could do is relationship based. And I think the show is also kind of showing that in between a few different things, right? Um, if you don't know where to get started, there are people to ask questions to. Um, there is a really awesome program. AAPL does have a mentoring program out there. I was the chair of it, and a few years ago, and we try to put people together. What basins are you working on? Where are you located? The plan is to keep everybody involved. So I would strongly suggest getting out there, signing up for that. You could be a mentor or a mentee per se. And when a lot of people think um, mentorship, They think tenured landmen. However, we have a lot of young individuals joining our industry. Some of these are college students, first years out. Anybody's a mentor. Even if you have 2 years of experience, I would strongly recommend signing up for that program. It helps to introduce people if you're locally, take them to your associations, introduce them to your peers and partners, get them involved. Involvement in your local and national organizations are extremely critical, and it helps you keep up to date too. I think AAPL does a wonderful job at that. I think they do a phenomenal job at keeping up with kind of all of the rules and regulations, providing continuing education, keeping everybody on the forefront. One thing you can't do is stop learning. We're still learning to this day. Um, 15 years in, I'm still learning things new. Being part of a OCAPL and being the president this year, learned a lot going through there. And so involvement, asking questions, and being present is a critical thing that we could all do.
Absolutely. Yeah, again, thank you guys for the plugging APL there. Appreciate it.
Thanks for everything you
Uh,
guys do.
well, with that this wraps up this episode of Landman Now. Thanks for listening, and again, big thank you to Dianna and Clarke for joining the show today and sharing their insights and expertise with us and getting setting the record straight for what Hollywood got right and wrong. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And as we talked about, if you want to learn more about APL, our resources and membership opportunities, please visit landman.org. Till next time, I'm your host, Chad Smith, and this has been Landman Now, podcasting the profession.